Writing songs, it wasn't the question of whether I could write songs, it was the question of whether anyone would care.
She had always been the subtle spark in the background, the brilliant architect behind timeless songs, the woman whose music raised generations and whose words spoke unfiltered truths. Carole King never chased fame with controversy. She let her work do the talking. That music carried her legacy for years, until now. Because today, after remaining silent for far too long, Carole King is finally speaking out. She's naming 6 individuals, 6 fellow artists she can no longer tolerate. These are people who violated trust, ignored limits, and treated her sacred view of music carelessly. What she's sharing isn't a tabloid headline, it's justice overdue. Each name holds a chapter filled with disillusionment, overstepped boundaries, and personal hurt. The first name? It was someone she once held in high regard, only to realize that sometimes charisma masks control. Don Henley, that's the one. In the beginning, Carole admired his artistry, his voice, his melodic instincts, and the Eagles' genre-blending brilliance. But admiration doesn't survive unchecked power. During a tense 1979 session in Los Angeles, the two butted heads hard. Carole craved authentic emotion. Henley, ever the perfectionist, wanted something polished. She accused him of scrubbing away a song's rawness until nothing living remained. Henley hit back, calling her too emotional. The tension peaked. Carole left mid-session. Then came the final blow, a public dismissal of her ideas in an interview. She never forgot. Even now, she avoids any venue where Henley might be present. But that wasn't her only heartbreak. Some wounds were wrapped in arrogance, sparkle, and fame. Elton John. There was a brief time when the two almost created magic together. Both masters of piano, both addicted to storytelling. Yet ego crushed the collaboration before it could breathe. Elton seized control of the space, interrupting, altering her progressions, pushing his UK flair. Carole felt erased. After a chaotic rehearsal in 1983, she walked out for good. She later confided that singing with him felt like wrestling a storm. But not every disappointment came loud. Some arrived in silence. That's how Eric Clapton left his mark. It was at a charity concert in the late 90s. Carole, ever open-hearted and team-oriented, approached him with a simple dream, an acoustic rendition of Natural Woman, intimate and soul-bearing, her voice entwined with his legendary guitar tones. But Clapton brushed her off without a word. No feedback, no courtesy, nothing. That silence spoke louder than any insult, and Carole, once again, learned how quiet rejection can echo for years. It didn't come from ego. Rather, it was a heartfelt offering, a mark of admiration. Yet Clapton missed the meaning completely. All he noticed was his own reflection in the moment. With a half-hearted shrug, he dismissed her. He muttered without lifting his eyes, "Not my scene." What stung wasn't just his choice of words, it was the frost buried in his voice. What I hoped for was to root my moments inside a broader timeline. That's always mattered, because I see myself as a watcher, just like you do. We both noticed it, the careless tone, the shrug of apathy. It was as if her body of work, her musical legacy, meant little to him. As if sharing the platform with her was beneath him somehow. That encounter didn't just bruise Carole, it stayed with her. She had shaped eras with giants, given voice to collective feelings. But in that instant, she was dismissed like a newcomer fumbling her first song. That night her smile was polite but hollow. Though on the outside she played it cool, inside she faded. Not out of desire for applause, but from a hope he'd get it. She believed maybe he too valued stillness in music. She thought he might respect restraint, the quiet magic of pause. But instead, he offered nothing. And in that void, the silence thundered louder than his loudest chords. More than a skipped set, it was a lost emotional exchange. And that moment never faded from Carole King's memory. The same unfolded with Bob Dylan. When Carole and Bob were billed together in the early 70s, fans expected fireworks. It felt like fate, two generational voices behind the same curtain. But she wasn't met with warmth. She reached out not to impress, but to show reverence for his voice and legacy. Her approach was soft, thankful, respectful, vulnerable. Meanwhile, Dylan, with a cigarette dangling and his head low, ignored her. He sneered, "Aren't you the one who writes for moms?" His dismissal wasn't just cold, it cut like a knife. Decades of songwriting, every lyric drenched in soul, were belittled in a second. She had built her world on honest words, not flash. But Dylan's tone painted her truth as naive, her depth as childish. That moment stung deeper than most. Carole was no stranger to the male-dominated music world. Still, she never saw that coming from him, the rebel poet. His words didn't just wound her spirit, they challenged everything she believed art could stand for. She never brought up the moment again. Not in lyrics, not in memoirs, not in late-night interviews, but something unspoken shifted within her. She stopped sharing his quotes, stopped defending his artistry, and when his name came up, she'd reply with a kind, distant pause. Because not every scar cries out. Some quietly hum beneath the soul. And for Carole, the deepest heartbreaks were often hushed, the kind that come from those she thought got it. None cut deeper than the fallout with Joni Mitchell. Their bond began with admiration, mutual respect between pioneers. They were among the few women writing from truth, daring to be soft in a loud world. Carole first saw Joni as a soulmate in song, smart, bold, unflinching in her craft. She stood in awe, bought every vinyl, clapped back at critics on Joni's behalf. Though Carole always embraced kindness, connection, and artistic collaboration, Joni chose the path of isolation, intellectual aloofness, and an air of untouchable brilliance. Then came the sting. During a late-night gathering filled with industry bigwigs and musicians, someone mentioned Carole's name, and Joni, cool-eyed and merciless, brushed her off with a smirk, labeling her creations as domestic poetry, a phrase that sliced through Carole's soul. The words didn't trickle down as whispers. They landed squarely and unmistakably. Carole felt gutted. That simple phrase cut deeper than any critical review ever had. To her, writing was a sacred act that captured the quiet nobility of everyday life. But hearing those words from a once-beloved inspiration made her feel like her art had been crushed into something trivial. She chose silence over confrontation. That was how she coped. Still, from that moment on, she quietly erased Joni from her world. No more albums, no more references, and when interviewers brought her up, Carole smiled with lips drawn tighter than a locked door. Because when the blade comes from someone you once idolized, the wound doesn't show. It echoes in quiet withdrawal. It's a hush so loud, not even a grand piano can rise above it. Even so, none of these moments came close to the chilling cruelty of the man who tried to claim not just her music, but her autonomy. Phil Spector. His name spoke volumes, yet Carole King wished she'd never had to hear it. To the world he was a legend, but to Carole, his legacy brought dread wrapped in fame. In the Brill Building, his presence towered like a shadow over the dreams of countless young songwriters. Initially, she admired from afar, marveling at the lush sounds he conjured in the studio. But awe slowly turned into unease. Behind every chart-topping anthem and wall of sound, she saw a man cloaked in velvet and control. His charisma was laced with chill. Every compliment was laced with unspoken threats. His authority crushed rather than guided. He mocked her suggestions in meetings, dismissed her piano-driven melodies, and once snapped, "Stick to the light stuff. Let the men handle the rest." She was young, still searching for her voice, so she stayed small and invisible. But deep within, something important fractured. Then came the night that refused to leave her memory. A dim hallway outside Studio B, hushed and haunting. No cameras, no witnesses, just him, looming over her with a predator's grin. He murmured words she locked away forever. Not one was written down, not even hinted at in her autobiography. But from that night on, she made herself a vow. He would never own a second more of her soul. Over the years, as her music soared on the airwaves, so did her strength and clarity. She carved her own lane, free from his validation, his influence, or his manipulation. So when Spector's crimes made headlines, his brutality, his chaos, his collapse, Carole stood steady. To her, it wasn't surprising. It was justice echoing from the past. A predator had finally lost his mask. One of music's most twisted icons had merely confirmed what she'd always sensed. Because authority without depth is just a roar in the void. This isn't a story of resentment. It's a declaration of what really happened. For Carole King, truth has always existed in the tension between the melodies, in the silence where feeling speaks louder than lyrics. She let the keys speak louder than conflict. She gave polite smiles to the press. She avoided drama when it knocked. She chose quiet strength over loud resistance. But not anymore. Because keeping quiet doesn't always protect. Sometimes it leaves you stranded. Sometimes it builds a wall around your heart. And when your life's work is built on being real, silence becomes a burden too heavy to carry. Her music wasn't meant to cover the pain. It came from it, note by note. And now, with time as her witness and her legacy unshaken, she's done hiding. Those 6 musicians weren't just industry peers. They were pivotal pages in her life. Some brought betrayal wrapped in charm. Some fueled a fire she dared not express. And others cut deep while smiling. Their choices left invisible bruises on her soul. They disrupted her flow, stole her spotlight, and tried to shrink her presence to background noise. This isn't vengeance. It's freedom. It's the deep breath of a woman who gave the world songs soaked in vulnerability. And now Carole King, the soft force behind the soundtrack of your life, is finally telling it all. She's letting herself be heard, fully, fearlessly, and challenging the world not to look away.